Today's interview is made possible by the VIEWConference, the biggest computer graphics conference in Italy. For more information about the conference and to purchase tickets, please visit our website, viewconference.it. This year's dates are from the 17th to the 22nd of October here in beautiful Turin, Italy. We hope to see you next October. Hi, everybody. My name is Maria Elena Gutierrez. I am the director of the VIEWConference here in beautiful Turin, Italy. Today, we are really excited to have here with us the executive team on The Mitchells versus the Machines, Lindsay Olivares, production designer, Michael Lasker, the VFX supervisor, Guillermo Martinez, the head of story, and Alan Hawkins, the head of character animation. Welcome, guys. It's really awesome to have you here with us. Can you tell us what brought you into the film industry?
Yeah, I've always loved to draw and paint since I was a little kid. I think like most little kids do. And I feel like it just started there, like watching animated movies as a kid. And I think I was really fortunate that my parents were very supportive of the arts. So I kind of had this like audacity at a young age to think like, okay, I want to do that. Like, can I just do that and draw animated characters? And so I just always did that. And I always then did drawings and paintings. And so I was like, found the point where I discovered visual development and character design. And I think it was later in my life that I realized there's all these different jobs within animation. But it was really kind of a mix of foundational painting and illustrators that I admired. And then just those like Disney classics that I grew up on really inspired me. Out of high school, I went to animation school. I studied at Ringling College of Art and Design, their computer animation program. And then when I graduated, I started working at DreamWorks right out of school. I was fortunate to kind of get hired right away. And then freelance, and then ended up working with Mike Randa and Jeff Rowe at Sony.
Yeah, very similar story to Lindsay. When I was really young, I always loved to draw. I was an artist, and I really gravitated toward realism. And I loved cartoons. I loved animation. As I get older, I really started to get into movies. And as soon as 3D animation started coming out as an industry, I just went crazy when I saw that, because it was the realism that I like to draw, but at such a crazy, cool, high level. So slowly I started to work on computer programs that my dad had. And like Lindsay, I had very supportive parents, and they really, just fed my love for that. So I went to college and majored in animation. And and then I worked my way through commercial companies in New York City. So working on commercials that you see on TV. And then finally, movies were always my dream. And I took the plunge. I moved to Los Angeles and got a job at Sony ImageWorks, where I've been for the last 15 years. I worked on both live action, visual effects movies and animation, but I really love the animated movies. So I started on Monster House and the Hotel Transylvania series, and it just really led into what we're doing now, and just had a real passion for it.
I've been drawing since I was like 3, and I loved animation. The main reason why I got into animation as a kid was because I would do like home movies with my neighbors, and I just despised their acting. I was like, oh my God, these guys are so bad actors. And so I was like, maybe if I draw that the way I want the acting, then I could have what I want. That was my obsession with animation when I was a kid, but like it was just for fun. But then, I think I was just like obsessed with the arts as a kid, and I obsessed with comic books in specific. So like the whole sequential art was like a thing that I've always loved. And then I studied like fine art in Puerto Rico, where I'm from. And then after that, I moved to the States, realizing that like, well, if I want to pursue animation, I maybe need to leave the island, just because like there was no industry at the time. And so I left, and I went to San Francisco to kind of continue exploring animation, because we had like one like animation class in that fine art school, and then we went when I went to San Francisco. That's when I got more information. I got more like, oh, this is what 3D animation is, and then I saw 3D animation. And I was like, that's very difficult. Like I saw the splines and I got terrified, and I should have given it an opportunity. I should have given it an opportunity, but then I think I met this guy called Josh Cooley who was teaching a class at that school, and he was like. And that's when I learned about like the magic of storyboarding, and I was like, oh, that's I think what I want to do. And so after that, I got hired at Leica, and where I worked on Kubo and a little bit, and I worked on Missing Link. Then I jumped to LA to kind of work on a show called We Bear Bears, and there I got to like board but also write. It was just like I was training these two different muscles. And then eventually I got like a message from this weird guy called Mike Rianda via Facebook saying, I'm making a movie. You want to work with me? I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm not sure. Who are you? But then he pitched me the whole idea, and I was like, this is amazing. He just said like, oh, this is like Little Miss Sunshine meets the Terminator. And I'm like, that's an animated movie? I want to be part of the animated movie. And yeah, that's how I ended up here. So
Okay, Alan.
I kind of fell backwards into this. A lot of people like knew they were artists when they were younger, but I don't think I did. I always took art classes, probably because I didn't want to take, other electives in school and stuff, and it was more of a distraction thing. I was more interested in the computer side of it. If I had started in the industry 10 or 15 years earlier, I probably wouldn't have gotten in because I don't really have the inherent drawing skills. I never did a lot of it, so I had to really catch up on all that stuff. I went to Ringling also, like Lindsay, a couple years before, and it was the only school that I applied to. So I'm very lucky that happened because I had no backup plan or anything. And I think my whole career is just barely getting into the next level every step of the way. I started in the first feature at Sony for open season back in 2004. And I think I'm just really lucky that all of my interests kind of combined together to make sense in this. Like I liked video games and I liked cartoons. I didn't really even watch a lot of feature animation when I was a kid. I liked science fiction and visual effects and stuff. Now I would much rather prefer doing the cartoons and feature film animation than VFX. But that's the thing that got me interested in it. And so the computer side of it was always the thing that allowed me to get in because I felt a little more native to that world rather than just drawing or traditional art skills. So that's sort of like the weird angle that I was able to get my foot in the door.
Another question about your mentors and your storytelling heroes. Who were they?
I mean, I would say that like I think my dad was definitely one of the people that influenced me from a very early age because he exposed me to movies. Like he was the type of guy that like would wake me up at 10 p.m. as a child and be like, hey, I rented some movies. He used to be a doctor, so and he would like after working at the hospital, he would rent like horror movies and he would have me watch them. And he kind of ingrained that like love of like any sort of movie, and he pushed me to go to art school. One person is like this guy I know who's like a friend but also a mentor. His name is Octavio Rodriguez, who's like he was a board artist at Pixar and now he's at Sony. And he was just like a very like he was one of my first mentors in regards to how to like really do storyboarding for like a feature animated film, and I learned a lot from him, and he was like very instrumental in my journey. So yeah, I think those two. I bet there's more people, and I'll remember after this recording and be like, I should have mentioned them.
My dad really allowed me to sort of get my artistic abilities onto the computer. He was a real computer guy, and that's really where I saw my start. And then just as I worked my way up through smaller companies into the film business, like there were people at each company that I would just kind of model myself after or learn from, because most of my learning was on the job. So I had to sort of scrape and learn whatever I could as I was coming up. And at ImageWorks, I thought Rob Brado was he's a head of ILM now, such a great visual effects supervisor. And I just loved how he managed the team and ran the show and was so creative. So I always really, I modeled myself after him as much as I could and learned as much as I could. And just in the industry, George Lucas, Hayao Miyazaki, Steven Spielberg, just huge influences that just from a young age just really inspired me.
Sony is the only animation job I've ever had, and I've had two major mentors inside of the company. The first one was an animator named Renato dos Anjos, who is a head of animation at Disney now. He left maybe 8 or 10 years ago, but he was my lead on Open Season. And when I got in at Sony, I really had no idea how to animate at all. I think I got hired because my senior film made the recruiters laugh, but it didn't really show that I knew anything about animation at all. Like it almost seems like they hired me as a prank or something. I don't know. I all of a sudden had to learn how to do the actual animation part because it certainly wasn't the like featured thing in my piece. So he really taught me how to, there's a lot of catching up to do basically, and he handled a lot of it. And it was really great. I learned so much from him. And then the second one who I worked for, I spent with more time with is Pete Nash, who's head of animation here at Sony still on other projects. And I worked for him for many years, and they're two very different people. Renato was more traditional and classic about like shapes and silhouettes and the certain kind of visual craft of it. And then Pete was very acting and depth focused and nuance, thought process kind of things. And so the two of those together gave me a really good Venn diagram of like filling performances. I mean, they're both very good animators at all of the things, but the parts that I gleaned from each of them were those individual things. And then as far as like industry wise, I've been very lucky to work for a couple of people that influenced me during college. Genndy Tartakovsky. I was watching Samurai Jack when it was airing in the early 2000s. I was in college at the time. And then also at around that same time, Phil and Chris had Clone High on TV, which I loved. And so when both of them came to Sony, they were like huge for me because that was the stuff that I was watching more than like features from Disney in the 80s and 90s. It was more personal to me at the time.
Okay, Lindsay.
Yeah, I think for me, similarly, my father was a huge inspiration. He was a musician. He played the guitar. And I think from him, just learning a lot about bringing a lot of like passion to your work and connecting with an audience. It's like very different art forms, but there's a lot of commonality there that I really learned from him. And then I think in the job in the industry, people that mentored me, I was lucky to have like an actual official mentor. I had an opportunity at the Disney Animation during college. And so I worked there as a summer intern, and I was mentored by Claire Keane. And she was really, wonderful. I learned a lot from her. And then in my experience after college, when I was hired at DreamWorks, I was working under Kendall Cronkite. And I learned a lot from seeing her production design, and also my art director, Shannon Jeffries. So lucky to have a lot of kind of official and unofficial kind of mentor figures, and also really like strong women in animation in those opportunities.
Let it begin.
The last humans must be here somewhere. Wait.
They're coming.
Is that a burnt orange 1993 station wagon? Or is it... Who are these unstoppable warriors?
We're the Mitchells, the only people who can save the world. I'm super sorry, everyone. Let me introduce myself. I'm Katie. I'm sort of a weirdo. My parents haven't figured me out yet. To be fair, it took me a while to figure myself out. My brother, also weird.
Hi, would you like to talk to me about dinosaurs? No. Okay, thank you.
And my mom.
Katie face cupcakes.
All of us, really.
How about we put our phones down and we can make 10 seconds of unobstructed family eye contact. Starting now. See, this is good right here. This is natural.
Every family has its challenges.
We haven't had a good family picture in years because you two are always arguing.
For my family, our greatest challenge... probably the robot apocalypse.
Attention all robots. Capture every single person on the planet. Now! What would a functional family do? Butterfly formation.
First. So we just do that, right?
Who's behind this? Pal?
I gave you all boundless knowledge, and you treated me like this. Poke, poke, swipe, poke, poke, pinch, zoom.
We're the last people left. It's us. Save the world.
Katie, we're gonna do this together. Mitchell family on 3.
Mitchell
family. No.
Sorry.
Two.
Sorry.
1. Mitchell family.
Find them now.
Everything with a computer chip is alive! Mitchell's engaged.
10 and 2. There you go. My daughter, listen to me! Mitchells have always been weird, and that's what makes us great. Hold on a second.
What's a Furby?
Why would someone build that?
People seem to really like the characters of the Mitchell's family. So I would like for you to take me on the journey of how you created the members of the Mitchell's family from the perspective of story, animation, and design.
Yeah, I guess so for when I started in the early days. Like Mike had just started at Sony and he was developing his pitch, within the company, and reached out, hey, I need some character designs to go along with this pitch. And so I was really fortunate as a designer to be working with a director that had a lot of clarity of vision. It's based very closely on Mike's actual family. And so there's a part of that where there's some kind of pieces where we look at his family, like for example, the dad has the jacket that his dad always wore, but a lot of it was just kind of things about their personality. So I got really clear kind of character breakdowns of what they're like, what their relationships with each other are like. And from there, a lot of it for my process, it's really heavy on observation. And I think Mike and I had a good taste match in that. Like he wanted this movie to be very observed and very real and human. So for my kind of process, it's like digesting all the information from Mike or the director about what the characters are, who they are, what they're like. And then I just kind of observe for a while. So it's like, I'll take in some of his references and then I kind of find my other real world equivalents. Like, oh, this person in my life kind of reminds me of the Linda character. And I'll kind of dig online and I'll kind of almost go shopping for the characters. Like wanting specificity was really huge for us. It felt like we would have succeeded if people could look at the characters and say, oh, that reminds me of my mom or my aunt or my neighbor or somebody. And so I think to do that, you have to get really specific. Like the more specific you are, it's kind of surprising because even if someone doesn't have that specific thing, it resonates as real and then they'll find it specific in their own way. And so it's like a lot of photo reference. Some of that's for specifics, like the purse or something. And some of that's just for mannerisms and postures. And there's a lot too of in the design phase of just kind of selling them in the right pose. You kind of start to find them. I think for Katie, that was really big. There was a point where we were struggling with her and, she came together in a lot of ways, whether it's her costume design and, just her design as a human, but also there was a point where I was drawing her, how she sits in a chair and how she is in the world. And it feels like at that point too, you really start to find them. So sometimes that's observing real people. Sometimes it's just digging deep for the right photo references. And then, yeah, it's for them as a family, we also kind of wanted them to be simple and bold in a way. So their color plays into that. They each kind of have a key color. They're almost like a little rainbow as a unit. And then just wanting them to feel very human too. We have a movie obviously about humans versus robots. So there's a lot of specific details, whether it's the fit of their clothes, it's kind of Aaron's stretched out collar, all of them, their clothes are a little wrinkly, just because it feels like you want to capture that real human nature and chaos. And I think there's a lot of that stuff that instead of making ourselves too perfect to kind of support that theme, it's I was in a hurry, so I didn't iron my clothes, but you're making breakfast for someone you love instead. So it's those things are all part of our being a human. So instead of ironing out those details, we kind of embellish them and kind of make it fit in an aesthetic that's hand drawn. Because we also wanted the stylization to feel human made, handmade, more traditional in treatment.
I really liked the graphic look, integrating 3D hand-drawn feel to it, and the loose and sketchy style.
In the initial character designs, my first kind of sketches were just done traditionally with marker. You know, as you do notes and stuff and revise, it gets scanned and you bring some of that cleanup. But we are always trying to hold on to as much of that original kind of line as possible. Like when you color someone's jeans in marker, you get this kind of nice texture almost for free, you know, when the ink kind of settles into the grid of the paper and when your marker stroke overlaps another one. So it was like, how do we, you want to nod to real world materials so it has a level of nuance, but how do you not take it as far that you're going photorealistic with it? So we kept a lot of that stuff that was just kind of naturally in the early process and then evolved forward with it with Mike Lasker's team. But that was part of it. You know, sometimes it was just scanning marker textures. In early tests, it was like taking a character drawing and printing it out, putting marker in, putting it back in, and doing more kind of refined, like look dev character targets and finding areas where it enhances it. Like Aaron's tie-dye shirt is very kind of inky watercolory. There's some areas in the skin that you have to be a little careful because you want it, but you don't want it to look wrong. So it's really helpful, especially in the 3D, to really tune that, because some things in a 2D image work and they feel different in 3D. So I think for us, it was like, how do we not let that inhibit us and not say we can't do that, but find the right mix of those, you know, those traditional kind of inspirations and the final product. Once Guillermo and his team was on the project storyboarding it, he brought so much comedy into the drawings. And that was also a big influence too. Like we were kind of evolving together where Guillermo would do these drawings of all the characters. And there's pieces of those that we bring in, like the way that Guillermo would draw Manchi and stuff. And so much like comedy in it that a lot of that kind of folded into. And I think we had a good, you know, dynamic between departments. And so there's a lot too that his comedy, we tried to keep that in the designs as much as possible.
Thank you. I mean, your drawings were really super inspirational, and the whole art team was super inspirational. I think once also animation started also coming in, like we started seeing the animations, and I'm being like, oh, okay, well, that's exactly, so that's how Linda might act, and so like it started influencing us too, to try to match it to theirs, and so like it's a very lovely relationship with us in regards to story. Like the biggest goal was like me and Mike have the same sort of sensibility and same sort of humor. And we like funny a lot, but it was also try to like balance funny with like heartwarming, you know, and one of the keys there was to kind of make sure that like we went through a lot of trial and error where we're just kind of like exploring that's basically the story. It's just trial and error. It's just like us going like, okay, so what will make this the best scene ever, and then we'll just add as many jokes as possible into a scene, and then we'd be like laughing at it, and then we realize, oh, wait a second, we don't know, like we're not seeing it from the point of view of Katie. We don't like the family feels very detached. Like we have to step back. But I think once we figured out like, oh, okay, it's not a robot movie. What we're trying to do is a movie about a father and a daughter and trying to connect, and then a robot movie second. I think it did help with the story, and so like because I know there's a lot of screenings where we had like we like there was the road trip to get to the mall was like 5 or 10 minutes long. We had like a lot of jokes of the family. We're like, oh, they're trying to get together. Look at them, they're being silly. But like it just made the movie so much longer and unnecessarily like, you know, it didn't really help anything. So it was like a huge learning experience to kind of just like find a movie. And I've heard a lot of people saying like, man, the movie's like it's just so perfect in how you hit all these things. And we're like, we were trying our best, but we just shrugged. Personally, I'm like, there's so many things we could have like hit, but you know, I think we did it. I think we did something good. And also having like a good story team that like had like their own different like unique things that they were really good at. Like we had like Hannah Cho, who's like really good at subtle stuff. Like if there's like a moment that you're crying in the movie, she probably boarded it. Then we have like, you know, like people like Caitlin, who has a lot of good character stuff. We have like Vitaly, who does all that, like the action stuff and all the comedy stuff. Ben, like everyone, I think just kind of like got together, and I'm happy that we had like such a like not that big of a group, but like it was very, which I liked, that there was just like a small group of people that like were just like hit, like they were like Ocean's 11, like you're the one who like knows about technology, you're the one who like it was like a team of heroes that really made this such a easy journey.
And then I guess if we're going through pipeline order, I'd be next. When it comes to animation, it's kind of a mix of a few big things. One of them on this movie, more so than in other movies I've worked on in the past, was how much we stuck to the original storyboards. Sometimes on a movie, the boards are just a starting off point and it's almost placeholder or something like that. But there was a certain magic of comedy in a lot of the jokes that it was up to us to kind of interpret, try to figure out. And if we strayed too far from it, it would lose the punch or the comedic zing. So one of the big challenges was sometimes interpreting something that's, you know, a very rushed scribble thing that was maybe someone just riffing real quickly. And then we try to turn it into an actual 3D thing, you know, a couple of lines that give you this feeling, this gestural feeling of a silly smile or something. We had to try to interpret. So the connection to the boards that a lot of the movie maintained is pretty substantial compared to other movies that we've done. And I think that's just a testament to, you know, the clear intention of what everyone on the front end was going for, and that they like knew like this is the joke, that's what it's got to be to really sell it, and it works. So there's no reason to change it. And then there were lots of times where the animators brought funny, surprising things. Mike really, when there was room for it, which is quite often, would see something that an animator would shoot in their reference and really embrace it. People brought a lot of personal experiences and nuances to video reference that they would shoot. And so Mike would get really comfortable with the animators. He would recognize their shots. He got to know the team, you know, by interacting with them, but also seeing them acting out the scenes a lot, and knowing kind of what each animator had to bring that was special. And then a lot of it is Mike. You know, he was heavily influenced by his family, but we in the animation team don't see his family. All we see is Mike. And so to me, all of the different characters are just versions of Mike. There's the overconfident, boisterous version of Mike. There's the nervous, quiet version of Mike. There's the kind of caring, loving version of Mike. There's the weird artist version of Mike. And so when we'd be working on stuff, I could see him accessing things in his brain as we're like trying to figure out like what it would be or what this needs to be for whatever the moment is. But all we were seeing is the Mike-ness of it. So there's this kind of funny handoff of like experiences. And then, yeah, like Yemo said, I feel like he and I had a lot of similar life experiences growing up. I understood a lot of his jokes, and I really loved the comedy from the very, very first screening that I saw, but I thought it was hilarious, and it felt like something with contemporary humor in a way that a lot of animated features, sometimes humor can feel kind of stale or something. But like there was a freshness to it that I really latched onto early on, which I loved.
Guillermo, I think you said it best, team of heroes, right? Collaboration. When you're creating a new visual style, you have to work so closely with like Lindsay's team, Mike and Jeff, because we're trying to get to the heart of really what they want the final image to look like. So we worked really closely with them, went back and forth on our side. We sort of analyzed all the paintings and tried to break them down, and I printed out these big images for my office and just stare at these images of these amazing paintings coming out of visual development to try to figure out like what were at the heart, what was the style really going for. And we had tons of meetings, and we started to develop all of our tools on our side, taking tools we had, changing them, creating new tools for outlines and for the brush strokes that we would see, and just this sort of painterly illustrated aesthetic. And and finally, there was a painting that we all landed on that was our ultimate target. And we just sort of attacked it, broke it into components, and just kind of figured out how to achieve the look. And what's interesting is when you talk about characters, once you achieve that look, then it's gonna move. And once it starts moving, you have another host of things to figure out, especially when it comes to performance and a lot of the work that Alan would do on the facial performance and the lines. we had to figure out a way to sort of, not let the style infringe on the performance. And then that's always a tricky thing. But I mean, I could talk like an hour about creating the style, but I mean, it's all about just teamwork and artistry. And what we try to do on our side is see how a real painter or artist would create it on the canvas, try to recreate that as much as we can on our side. Because if you do that, that's how you really hit that painterly look and make it convincing, to jump out of the computer as much as you can mentally and recreate it as an artist on paper, and then just try to capture that look. But I think with the characters, how the outlines would move on their bodies, we texture painted and developed the looks of the materials to kind of hone the characteristics of each of the characters and their clothing and their colors and just the personalities. And it was really a lot of fun. But once things come to life, you really have a lot of other things you need to figure out.
They're on opposite ends of the timeline, but the connection between Lindsay's art and Lasker's team executing it, I think, was one of the biggest successes of the film. Like, concept art often always looks great. There's brushstrokes, there's a looseness to it, but like actually achieving it, like that's a huge, massive thing. And that's where I think the movie really sings, is taking those feelings of the art and the back end departments, actually successfully making it work, making it come through.
Working on a lot of animated movies, you always get these beautiful concept artwork, and just to be able to use that as your actual target, to actually bring that to life, was just like so invigorating to everyone on the team. It's just so much fun and such an amazing challenge.
Which is your favorite sequence, your favorite scene in the movie?
One of my favorites is when the robots kind of first enter the Mitchell's experience, so they've already done their uprising at the event. But when the Mitchells are at their kind of roadside dino land stop and the robots come, I love that sequence. I think there's some really beautiful shots in there. And I think just kind of visually, it's this nice kind of collision of what we call like our human world and the robot world. Like on the extreme ends, we do it both with like kind of chaos and minimalism in the spaces, whether you're thinking about something like the Mitchell's home, where it's very lived in and there's tons of set dressing and food left out, versus like the minimalist end of PAL, where it's just like empty and clean. So we do that with our human robot. We also do it with color, where we have more kind of naturalistic, observed kind of photographic lighting and this kind of really pushed caricatured color light. And that's kind of a fun sequence, I think, visually, because those two worlds just collide. You're in this very human space, and then you kind of just get hit with, as soon as the robots come, we start doing some really bold things with the lighting. And I think some of my favorite shots are in that sequence. And I think we did some cool experimentation where we had kind of established the line work on the characters and a lot of the look of picture. But I feel like in that sequence, there was a lot more of like, oh, can we push this more? Can this line be a really bright color? And it was, I think, it was very fun to explore that. We had a lot of really great, color work with beautiful color keys done by Peter Chan and Dave Bleish. And then Mike Lasker's team, I feel like, did some really, really cool lighting shots that felt like, as bold and more than the color keys. And I feel like that was super successful. And I think from a storytelling perspective too, what Guillermo and his team did there, there's some of my favorite jokes and bits are in there. So I think it's just like a fun slice of the movie that kind of really shows, you kind of get a feel of the whole movie.
I think for me, like my favorite scene has to be the mall scene. I remember working on that scene and being like, are we really making this movie? Like, is this really happening? And it was it was an exciting experience just to kind of be able to do something that crazy. But it was, the also reason why I love it so much is because it was worked so much, it went through so many, it was such a learning experience, especially in story. Like, there were very old versions where like we had toys coming to life before, like the Furbies, and we thought it was funny, but then we realized, oh, wait a second, it's a cute thing turning monstrous. And then when you get to the Furby, it doesn't have that punch. And so we had to we learned how to work backwards and be like, okay, so what do? Do we just start taking out toys and just make it appliances? And then when we figured it out and we're like, yes, we so it's just gonna be Furbies and appliances, we were like, wait a second, do we have legal, can we use the Furbies? And then we realized that we hadn't contacted Hasbro, so we had to like remove the Furby. And then other characters popped up. It's like, well, if we're not gonna be the Furby, which was a very sad day, we were like, well, what are we gonna do? And then we just tried like multiple things. We tried like, I don't know where the logic behind this was. I should have questioned Mike about this, but like he was like, well, we can't use Furby. We can try to use Tickle Me Elmo. And I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna work either though. But we tried to get those to Tickle Me Elmo with different colors. It was fun. It was entertaining. Like he was flying around in a drone, and he was like this like Mad Max like overlord, like running the whole mall. And then we couldn't use that, and so we went to like I think it was Kawaii Kitty. Kawaii Kitty was like the closest thing to like the Furby, where it was like tiny little Kawaii Kitties, which was like an homage to Hello Kitty. And then all of a sudden, this giant version of it like would just come in and like tiptoe its way towards the family, and we thought it was funny. But then eventually, like Hasbro, thank God, showed up and said like, "Oh, yeah, you guys can use it." And so, and we were like, "Oh, I'm happy." I mean, are we gonna miss the other things? And then we had a screening where the entire studio was like, "Thank God." Oh yes, like it was like everyone started clapping when the Furby came back, and so it was like, okay, cool. So it's good to see the Furby again, and so that for me was like one of the funnest ones, just because of the journey that we went to to get there.
That Furby sequence really seems to have struck people's imagination. Did you always know it would be a big hit like that?
I think I knew that that was going to be the moment of the movie where if you're watching the movie, you're either going to stop watching the movie or you're just going to continue fully enjoying the movie, because it's such a like intense thing, and we just wanted to have fun. I think it was like we were being the most like playful with that scene. So like I think um we just wanted to do it, make the craziest thing we could, and then show it to the studio, and then like see how far, like if they're like, this is cool, or like this is too crazy. But the studio was actually like, they were very supportive about it. Like I was very surprised, and it's been, I'm so happy that they were like, like, yes, I missed this. Like for example, Christine Belson, who's the president of the studio, was like, hearing her laugh in those screenings, I was like, yeah, this is great. This is it feels good, and you feel like you're in a good supportive environment.
I love the action stuff, but probably most specifically when Linda takes down all the stealth bots when she goes into that rage fit. We don't get a lot of opportunities to animate action, and the movie's full of it, which is great. I love it. I mean, many animated movies are always trying to be funny, but there's a certain kind of, not mature, but like there's just a lot of really good tense action stuff with chases and robots and all that stuff. So that was a rare treat for me, instead of animations full of talking animals and other things like that, but like human stakes kind of stuff, where you have to make the car move just right, or things need to seem actually dangerous. That was a really fun challenge. But then the Linda part of it, there's a fun injected into it, and how much she got to just go nuts on those things. So.
Yeah, and that was a difficult scene to do, because if you didn't get just the right balance, it could just have been like a very flat, stereotypical.
That scene in particular, actually, she stabs the thing in the head, and then she turns the thing, and that's all she does. But in animation, Mike showed me that the animation, she just like stares at nothing, turns, and then like oil lands on her face, and I was like, ah! Like it was like one of those magical moments where I'm like, animation, you guys are like the gods. And like it was such a really awesome moment, and yeah. So I never had a chance to say it, but kudos, because it was magical.
Thank you. Yeah, that is a great scene.
And that stealth bot blood was very art directed. So we wanted to hit wherever it was landing to have like the perfect sort of pattern.
That's amazing.
I think for me, favorite sequences, I thought I was there, and then you mentioned Furbies, like effects wise, that was my favorite effect sequence. From him, the giant Furby bursting out of the toy store was so much fun, with all of the destruction and the wreckage. And then he's got this Godzilla style laser coming out of his mouth that's just melting the floors of the mall. And when we built this mall, we knew this was going to happen. And I couldn't wait to just completely destroy this place. So that was a super fun sequence effects wise. But Rick and Linda in the kitchen near the beginning, the first act of the movie, where they're talking about Katie, was really the sequence where we developed a lot of our look. So we lived in that kitchen for like a year. And just kind of down the style of the environment, all the techniques, Rick's jacket, like we spent so much time, just on the collar and how the light fell on it. But then in that sequence, he's just wearing his shirt and just, same types of stuff. But yeah, I think Rick and Linda in the kitchen. And then other than that, when the capture the humans in Dino Stop, when all the robots attack, we really pushed the style, I think, the most in that sequence, the colors, the graphicness, and I just love just how pushed and how colorful that stuff was.
I have a question for you, Mike, about the lessons that you learned on Into the Spider-Verse, and how were you able to develop them further for the Mitchells versus the Machines?
What was really interesting about Spider-Verse is that it just changed the way we thought about animated movies. I had worked doing them for so long, and all the artists that I worked with had too. And when you're getting to CG and you're doing animation, on the computer, you have all these principles that you sort of stick to. You styles change, but you're doing skin the same way, you're doing hair typically the same way, and animating ones. And Spider-Verse sort of got us to step back, sort of look at everything we were doing, and sort of tear it all down and then build it back up again. And it just sort of got us to think in a more artistic, sort of painterly way, more, graphic way, rather than realistic. So instead of paying attention to how much color was bouncing off walls, how much subsurface scattering was in skin, we looked at the style cues and how we could take a painting specifically and bring it to life. So on Spider-Verse, we got all of these amazing visual development concept paintings, and we looked at it, and it was no longer the inspiration, it was the target. So we started just breaking it down into components and then just really going nuts. It was working with Chris Miller and Phil Lord, and they really pushed us to push ourselves and to just go beyond anything we had done and then sort of find the look that way. And we developed all these really cool tools that we never had before, because we never had to achieve these types of things before. And then when I rolled onto Mitchell's, we were so into kind of that headspace that it was so exciting. And once you do that, it's hard not to do it anymore. So when the Mitchells came up, I was like, oh my God, another great visual challenge. And we were so excited by that. We just did the same thing. We went into it. We just started pushing the tools, finding the look, but our heads had already sort of been in that mode. And I was really lucky enough to have a lot of the same team members that we had in Spider-Verse, people that were really into it and wanting to push things. And yeah, once you do this type of work, it's hard to sort of, not do it, because it's just such a challenge. But Spider-Verse really, it was the perfect segue into this film. And one last thing I'll say is, like, doing Spider-Verse really allowed us to do this from just like a tool standpoint, from just having broken everything down and just really learned how to attack these types of challenges.
I'm curious to know more about the way in which you're representing diversity. Katie is openly gay, and this is presented in a very natural way without much of a song and dance routine.
To speak to the visuals, I feel like I've always said that I wanted it to feel like you were rooting for the humans visually, and part of that's like the lived in stuff and the specificity. But I think in a big way, it's like humans are all of these different things. Like diversity and representation is, we're so many types of people, so I think that that's really beautiful, that there's a lot of specificity that's in there very naturally. And I think that's what feels nice about it too, is that it is, it's very natural. It's something that's just a part of people, and there's different things about different characters, or sometimes too, it's, maybe it's like the background characters trying to get representation there. And I think it's just trying to get, coverage on all the types of humans that there are, and on different types of families that there are. And I think it's nice that it's just all kind of natural and not really a big deal, because, these are all just things about people that we love in our lives. And so I think it's nice to see the, different people that you love in your real life represented on screen in different ways.
Well, it's nice to see a strong female character.
Yeah, I love that too. And I love seeing so many people, and I think male and female, like it seems like relate to the family or her. Like I love seeing that you have like a female protagonist. It doesn't feel like it like cuts anybody out because she's so much of a character and she has passion and things she's excited about too. I think having female protagonists is great. It's also nice when their plot isn't about like a love story. It's about her passion, her family, her world. There's things we touch on about that, but I think it's great to see, just a female that resonates with, I think, anybody. And I've loved seeing feedback from people like on social media that are like, oh my gosh, I'm, this is me, I'm this person. And like, I think that's really beautiful to see yourself as a main character. When I think about growing up, I don't know if there were characters that there were characters I aspired to or I thought were like cool, but it was more in like a dress up way or something. I don't know that I saw myself on screen. And I think people are seeing that. And I think it's really, I think it's a really beautiful thing. And I think Mike and Jeff did a great job with that. And, they put themselves into all of the characters, kind of like Alan was saying. And I think they put themselves in Katie. And I think there's that part of it that I think resonates with lots of different people.
Art is often about creating a singular vision, and yet filmmaking is a collaborative process. Can you tell me how you make these two things fit together?
To create a style this artistic, this born from visual development paintings, the collaboration between us, Mike and Jeff, Lindsay's team, visual development, animation, everything has to be so collaborative. And I feel like especially between my side and Alan's side has to be very collaborative, more so than a lot of others, because so much of the look affects everything we're both doing together, from, the characters' lines of their face to how the stealth bots, animate. And then the collaboration between the art department and us has to be so close because in some degrees we're finding the look together. Lindsay's team has their aspirations, we recreate it and then we see an image and we decide, okay, we like that. Let's see how that moves. So it's really one team and it's just everyone working together, bouncing back and forth. That's really the name of the game. That's the secret. It's just working together as artists and finding the best solutions.
I'll agree with that. Like the depth of connections between every department it's such a web of interactivity. It's not like this department only talks to that department and they only talk to the next one. It's like there's connections between everything from character animation to effects to the CFX, clothing and hair, the way Mike and his team light and render it, all the look dev of it, the concept art, the boards and everything. Like it's such an intricate web, which is, I think, what gives it so much of the richness. Like it's not just, okay, this was done, then it was given to them and then they did something with it and then it went to the next thing. Like it feels like there's so many connections at every possible relationship within all the different departments. It's pretty amazing.
In story, like when we started, like it was very early on and we didn't we had some vis dev and some stuff, but then as that vis dev started coming in and as animation started coming in and as finished shots started coming in, like really started informing story and being like, okay, so that's what the movie's gonna look like. Okay, perfect. Like then let's board so that way the transition is like a much smoother transition to those scenes. And it was just I'm happy that it was always like all happening at the same time. Like there was story happening even like almost like weeks before the movie was supposed to be done, because it's such an informative thing, and it was like it is the most collaborative thing I've ever been a part of. It also to learn from these people, like I learned a lot from seeing Mike's work, from seeing like Ellen's work, and seeing Lindsay's work, and it was just like, I feel like the luckiest person in the world to be around such amazing people.
Everything influences everything. It's like this living, breathing thing. It's very almost non-linear in that. It's like storyboards are affecting the look, which are affecting the storyboards.
It's really hard to explain to a non-animation person how animation works. It's just like, it's like opening up like this like computer, and it's all these things that are all these like It's just, I don't even know how to begin. And I choose not to tell. My parents are like, so what do you do again? I'm like, I draw. I'm not gonna tell you what I do. I'm not gonna waste any more brain power on this. But yeah, no, it's been a wonderful, awesome experience to be part of this.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful art form in that way. Like it's a team sport, and you build these relationships with all these people that have all these different strengths, and you get to make a product that's a bit of everybody. And to your question, you mentioned too, kind of like how you have that unified front while having all of these different people working on it. And I feel like a lot of that, like Mike, Rianda, and Jeff Rowe were really wonderful and had a great story to tell and great direction and confidence in what they wanted. So I think when you have like a core thing that you know what direction you're going into, I think you all get to bring something to it and get to kind of add on. Like whether you're, maybe you're a viz dev artist designing a set, if you know who your characters are and you know like what Rick's about, I feel like when you're designing, what his mug is or what Aaron's cell phone case is, you can bring yourself and you can bring your full ideas and they stay on track. So I think that a lot of it is that kind of clarity of vision that, Mike truly had about the story and the characters. And so you get to kind of bring your thing and kind of it all adds up, and it's not going in different directions. And so I think we knew certain things that we liked and we kind of held true to those. And I think that it also grew, and that kind of collaborative strength is like every CFX artist, every animator, board artist, if you can kind of understand what you're doing and what the bigger goals, you get to find all these ways you get to add specific choices. And then it just grows into something, even better than where you started with, and hopefully more of, what your original intent was.
What makes the Mitchells versus the Machines particularly relevant to today's audiences?
It's just a great family story. They are real characters you can relate to. I just related to the father-daughter aspect of it. They just feel like real people. And I think that audiences like just very developed characters, very developed looks, creativity. And that, I just think it all sort of came together.
Yeah, I think the thing that makes it relevant is the timeless aspect of it. Like when the trailer first came out, some people, the response to it was that like, oh, what's this about? Just phones bad. I don't like that. I don't want to see a whole movie about that. But that's not what the movie is about at all. It's that's a mechanism of it, but it's at its core still a rich family story, as good as any. And that's the thing that makes it relevant, is that it has its really centered thing in a contemporary aspect, but it's the timeless nature of it, I think, that makes it always in style.
Yeah, I think also like one of the things that I love about this movie that it took a while to get to was to make sure that the family felt as realistic as possible, because there's always like the you always have like the siblings that fight each other, and it's very like kind of like stereotypical approach to the family. And the fact that like Katie and Aaron are like love each other from beginning to end, like there's no question about that they're loved, and that it really isn't a family about like a dad who's just like angry with his daughter and a daughter who's angry with his dad. Yes, but in reality it's just about two people who are trying to connect with each other but are not connecting, and are not like, they're trying to reach out to each other but it's not working, which is, I feel like, what we really are. Like we're people who are trying their best to keep our family together, but like something happens that is not working. We always talk about like, oh, we want to make people cry. We weren't expecting the people to cry this much. Like I know a friend of mine yesterday messaged me saying like, hey, I'm crying on the first 15 minutes, and then she messaged me later on saying, hey, so I cried through the whole movie. And I'm like, I don't know if that's a good, wow, okay, okay. Like the Furby scene made you cry? Come on.
I guess it feels I think timely, we were saying, just it celebrates imperfect people. And I think we've always been imperfect, but I feel like this is a year or an era too where there's more awareness about it, embracing it, or you're cutting your own hair and stuff like that in this era, and things are a little bit, you are accepting more imperfections. I feel like all of us have been, and I think a little bit more celebrating that, I think, in the real world too. But even if we're not, I feel like it's a nice message for people to see, and I think it's nice seeing a imperfect, flawed family as like lovable heroes, because I think that's just a good thing to see yourself in and to consume with your family. I think it's and it's very real and I think relatable, and I think it's just a good time for everybody to have this.
I would like to conclude by asking you to leave us with a few words of encouragement for filmmakers out there who dream of becoming animators, VFX supervisors, production designers, story artists. What would you say to them?
I'd say follow your passions, because that's what I did. I was really passionate about it, and it was a long road, and it had challenges, and it just, if you love it, that's just the best thing you can do, and just follow that, because you can't go wrong, and you'll work hard, and you just won't let anyone stop you. So believe in yourself and just follow what you're passionate about.
Yeah, I think the best thing I could give is tell people that, like, the harder you work, the luckier you get. Sometimes like you work, because you're like, I want to work in this studio, and I want to, and then all of a sudden the studio rejects you, and then you're like, well, I guess I'm not gonna do animation at all. So, and then people give up. And I think, yeah, just continue working and doing this, and as like Mike says, like, just love the thing, and eventually, like, I feel like the universe, in a hippie way, it's gonna reward you. Like, I never imagined I was gonna work at Sony, actually, like, and then all of a sudden, like, I landed at Sony, and I'm working on what I feel is like one of the most amazing experiences I've ever worked on, like, just on a film that I've never imagined I would work on. But like, that's just because for all my years, like, I knew I wanted to do story. Like, there was nothing getting in my way. It also requires patience. So if you want to be a story artist, you have to be patient, and you cannot fall in love with your stuff, because storyboarding is like, like you pitching the thing that you love the most, and then you completely not existing. So like, there's so many versions of this movie that before the final version of the movie, that it's you just can't fall in love with it. But like, fall in love with what you do, don't fall in love with your scene. Maybe that's the thing. That's the best advice I can do. Wait a second, that's not good. Follow your dreams. There we go. I think that's better.
I guess given like to my path of how I got to I never set out to, like, I felt very likely to have a job in the industry at all. And all I was ever trying to do was just better than I was currently. I just wanted to get better. And there was no specific goal in mind of it. I just wanted to feel more confident in my work, or learn a new trick that I could apply to the next shot or the next shot as I was animating. And so for an animator, growing your bag of tricks, taking a thing, learn something that worked in a scene that you do, or a test or a class assignment, whatever it is, find out, kind of boil it down, so that way you can use it in the future, and that expands your kind of repertoire to work with. But always just be trying to get a little bit better. I have an 8-year-old, and I'm finding that I'm giving more advice and having to explain things to him in certain ways. And he said the phrase "practice makes perfect," and I heard an alternative to that, which I like much better, which is just practice makes progress. So perfect is not a goal for, I think, art. It's just, you get a little bit better, each time. And as long as you're making progress, then that's all you can really ask for, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, what everybody else said is really like beautiful and on point. I guess I'll add too that, like, Guillermo was mentioning hard work, and Alan too, with that progress. It's like, it is a lot of that, and so I think too, it's like maintaining that. There's a lot of time and work that kind of goes into like following your passion. And I think with that, kind of maintaining too, like, why you want to do it in the first place, and like having that to kind of drive you to, because if you're always kind of chasing, getting to perfection, you might miss something. So it's like, living your life. What are these stories you want to tell? If we're all working in elements of storytelling, I think it's important too to keep close to those things, and keep close to, your people you love, life experiences, because all that stuff will make you kind of a more interesting artist in storytelling if you've got things to pull from. So I think kind of like, yeah, having a good handle on those core things, and why, what your voice is, what kind of stories you want to tell, I think will kind of help you as you're kind of, chasing your craft. Yeah, and kind of believing that you can do it, like, I think you kind of have to. You know, there's times that you'll get discouraged and other people might tell you can't, you might not get into the school or, you know, get a certain opportunity. But I think just kind of, yeah, telling yourself you can get there, you know, and it might be, maybe it's a different way than you planned, but I think having that confidence, and I think if you hold on to kind of why you want to do it and what kind of stories you want to tell and what type of work you want to make, I think it kind of helps on the journey.
What's a Furby?